Hello and welcome to Theatre.Reviews with Paul Severn. I'm here at the Almeida Theatre to see Tammy Faye with music by Elton John, lyrics by Jake Shears and a book by James Graham. And with that five-star creative team, are we going to see a five-star musical? So the music for Tammy Faye the musical is by Elton John, and it's very enjoyable. It's hard to tell at one listen just how catchy the tunes are, but they're in the style of his glam rock era, and a few certainly got the heart racing. The lyrics are by Jake Shears of Scissor Sisters fame. They do their job of illustrating what's going on. And again, it's difficult to make a judgment hearing them once. They didn't have any of the unexpected words or rhymes that you find in the very best lyrics, but they're very serviceable. The book, which is, if you like, the bit between the songs, is by James Graham, and it's excellent. Funny and interesting. He's on top form. The story of the rise and fall of televangelists in 1980s America is a cautionary tale that reverberates to this day. And the story of Tammy Faye herself, basically good but flawed, is an all-too human tragedy. As Tammy, Katie Braben gives a knockout performance. Yet, despite all it had going for it, I wasn't touched by Tammy Faye the musical. Keep watching and I'll tell you more about what's so good about Tammy Faye and try to work out what I think went wrong, for me anyway. It's a musical, and so it stands or falls on its music. Now, Elton John's experienced at writing musicals. He's had hits with The Lion King, Aida, and of course, Billy Elliot. He knows how to integrate the music with the plot so that it keeps the story moving and adds to its depth. The music he's written here harks back appropriately to his glam rock heyday. Songs like If Only Love, which is a beautiful ballad, or The Rousing Empty Hands, or The Plaintive If You Came to See Me Cry, or Right Kind of Faith. You can imagine them slotting easily into his 1970s songbook, though perhaps not on a greatest hits album. They are stirring and often accompanied by a large chorus line of dancers, choreographed by Lynn Page. But none of the songs are quite showstoppers, except maybe the finale, See You in Heaven, which certainly gets people bouncing in their seats. Tammy's star shines because she is not the stereotype mousy housewife. She is bright in brain, eyes and dress. Great glittering costumes from Katrina Lindsay, by the way. She's witty and she's compassionate to the point of crying on a regular basis. And it takes someone exceptional to play this funny, warm woman who can also belt out high-octane songs. This production has such a performer in Katie Braben, who has a beautiful voice and powerful lungs, and can hold the entire audience in her hands. Even when she's brought down by her only too human failings, we continue to love her because she exudes goodness and humility and humour. What really sets her apart, other than being a woman in this man's world, is that while the others preach hate, she preaches love. The others are homophobic and consider AIDS to be a plague sent by God. She says Christians should love everybody, and she brings people onto the show who would normally be persona non grata to evangelicals, including, most famously, a gay pastor who has AIDS. This occupies a small amount of the show, but is immensely moving. James Graham, one of our finest living playwrights, clearly believes in the adage, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. So Tammy Faye is another example of James Graham giving us a history lesson and telling us why it's important. His play Best of Enemies, which has just opened in the West End, I gave it a 5-star review when it premiered at the Young Vic a year ago, tells us about two what we would now call political pundits who faced up to one another in the first popular TV debates in America back in 1968 when President Nixon was elected. In Tammy Faye, he again goes back to the early days of television. Evangelists, following in the footsteps of Billy Graham, were inspiring masses of people in churches and arenas with their fiery talk. Then they discovered television, and in the 1970s and 80s became known to millions who paid massive amounts of money to their churches, a lot of which they pocketed. More importantly, perhaps, is their association with politics in America. Now, I didn't know this, but because I thought presidents had ended their speeches to the nation with "God bless America" since time immemorial. But I learned from this musical that President Nixon was the first to use that phrase. Prior to that, presidents carefully stuck to the constitutional requirement to keep church and state separate. The evangelists expanded on this with the help of Ronald Reagan to create the so-called moral majority and a Christian right. One evangelist, Pat Robertson, played in this production as a smarmy snake by Nicholas Rowe, even put himself forward as a potential Republican presidential candidate. Ever since then, the Republican Party has relied on the Christian right to deliver them substantial numbers of votes, and has tailored its policies accordingly. So, the establishment of women's and gay rights, for example, has been slowed down, and in the case of access to abortion, reversed. So, very relevant to today. Anyway, that's the history lesson. Very interesting, I found it. But the great thing is that James Graham is able to make it so very interesting. The characters he creates are funny and frightening at the same time. Take the evangelist Jerry Falwell, Tammy's nemesis. He's portrayed as a humourless, negative, mean-spirited man with narrow eyes, a dead voice and a hangdog expression. In one of the many funny lines, it said he didn't die of heart failure. That was how he lived. It's actually hard to believe this character could evangelise anyone, but the brilliant performance by Zubin Vala sends a chill through the auditorium. Tammy herself is seen rising from a tacky Christian puppeteer to a faltering TV show presenter to the star of America's biggest Christian channel, and the founder of a Christian theme park, like Disneyland, but with better people. Of course, it's her husband Jim Baker who gets top billing at first, because the evangelical Christians believe that a woman's place is in the home, or, failing that, at least as a support for her husband. All the evangelical men we meet behave badly, eventually succumbing to pride, greed, adultery, or some other sin. Her husband, too, lets her down. Incidentally, he's played by American actor Andrew Rannells, who is extremely funny, whether he's being nervous at being on TV, pompous when he believes himself to be in control, or snivelling at his failure. Bunny Christie's set is just right. She leaves plenty of room for the actors to move on a relatively small stage, but at the back is a set of 25 identical TV screen-shaped openings, which act as TV screens, but are also windows out of which characters poke their heads to contribute to and comment on the on-stage activity. These include, hilariously, the Pope and the Archbishop of Canterbury. The director is Rupert Gould, who is the Almeida's artistic director, and you can see his hand in making this such a slick, punchy musical. So why isn't it a 5-star musical? I think the problem is that, interesting as the story of the rise and fall of the male televangelists is, it's not that engaging. But so much time is spent on them that the central character of Tammy is shortchanged. She and Jim are clearly fascinating, tragic people, but they're not rounded enough, which meant I wasn't able to get fully engaged with their story either. So, like Tammy Faye herself, this musical is very good, but slightly flawed. I give Tammy Faye 4 stars. I hope you enjoyed this review, or at least found it useful, and if you did, why not subscribe to this channel, and then you'll be the first to know about my future reviews. Or you can read my reviews at Theatre.Reviews. You can follow me on Mastodon, Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. Thank you for watching.